Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, Jovenes and Power. Today we have the honor to have Valery Lucille. She's going to be talking about healing generational trauma. Thank you so much, Valery, for being here. It's truly an honor to have you sharing your precious time with us and your knowledge. So thank you. And please introduce yourself, a little brief introduction of who Valery is.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure. I love speaking about this topic. So my name is Valery Lucille. I'm a Dominicana. You will hear a little bit more about my story as I move forward. I actually I'm a teacher by trade. That's my career. I'm in the midst of going back to school for my MSW, which is my really just master's in social work because I want to go into therapy. And so a lot of the work that I do, I coach women of color. And so a lot of the work that I do is about healing. And especially as a first gen, I do a lot of talking about healing generational trauma. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to go ahead right in because right after this is a little bit more about me. So we'll go ahead and start. So today we're talking about all healing generational trauma and really what it looks like, what trauma is, what healing is, and really the steps that you need to take in order to start your healing process. So my name is Valery Lucille, like I said. I'm an Afro-Latina Dominicana. My parents are immigrants. They came here. My mom came when she was in college. My dad came a little after I was born here. So I am Dominican American. My first language is Spanish. I was an ESL student for all the way up to third grade, where then my English took over. And so I talk a lot of Spanglish. My Spanish has been rocking because I kind of forgot a lot of it and had to relearn it on my own. And so I graduated with my BA in psychology and my master's in education. I have over 10 years of really coaching experience, and I am a self-development junkie. So I love reading books about self-development and how to improve myself and my life. I love podcasts and watching, really like learning from other people as well. So different coaches or just the people that are like really famous, like Tony Robbins, Mel Robinson, also like all those people that are really high up there. I love listening to their experiences, really. I'm married, so I just got married last July, and it was beautiful and fantastic. I've been with my husband now for about to be 7 years, and we have a beautiful 5-month baby girl. It's crazy. She was born in October, and it's wild how time has flown. It's so fast. She's so big and has a personality of her own. And so it really makes me appreciative of really the fact that I've done my own healing work because I know when I'm really teaching her how to grow up and how to do things and just life in general, that she won't have a lot of the traumas that I had growing up as a first gen daughter. I'm also a life coach, like I mentioned earlier, for women of color, and you can find my Instagram at Valery Lucille, and you'll see the work that I do there. I tried my best to really put information out there that's genuine and that I'm very passionate in helping people really like step out of their comfort zones and start developing the healing habits that they need in order to move up and level up in their lives. Feel free. I will be talking a lot about different modalities and just different ways of steps of way of healing. And if you don't understand something, or if you have a question, feel free to leave a comment in the chat box. We will be interacting a little bit throughout the presentation. So I do encourage you to use the chat box so we can get to know each other a little bit. Okay. So to begin this, I want you to take a moment. So I want you to think, look, this is a little icebreaker we're going to do. So if someone were looking at you right now, what is something that they would never know about you? And I want you to go ahead and write it to the chat and send it to me. Don't send it to everyone. Go into the chat box, choose my name, and I want you to think really personally and think about it. Like looking at me, you would never know what. I'll give everybody about 2 minutes to do that. It doesn't have to be anything like super personal or anything crazy. It could be something very simple that maybe you'd like to share today. Give everybody about 1 more minute. So I'm just going to make this smaller because I can't see the chat. Where is it? Here it is. It doesn't have to be a personal question. Specifically, it's just about you, right? So, like, if I were to see you in person today, what is something that I would never know by just looking at you physically about you? Like, what's something that I would never know, right? So, like, sometimes when people look at me, they can automatically tell that I'm Dominican, right? That's something I can tell. Or they could automatically tell that I'm Spanish, right? So, I want you to think about something that people would never guess by just looking at you and sharing that with me. Okay. So I'm not gonna take too long here, but one of the ones I want to share is I know a bit of sign language. That's actually really cool. That's actually me too. I actually know a little bit of sign language as well. I learned the alphabet, and I know a few words and things like that, like how to say certain things. I learned it when I was in high school, and that's pretty cool. Let's see. I'm kind with babies. Love that. And I got, oh, so someone wrote, I live on my own, right? No one will see that. So there were a few other people mentioned, but the reason why I did this icebreaker, and I do this with a lot of my groups, is because just looking at somebody from the outside, you will never know what they're going through, what they like, what they don't like, what they've been through. Um, just your exterior doesn't tell somebody how much trauma or how much healing you've gone through, right? Everything's on the inside. You will not know everything about somebody by just looking at them. And it's so important to remember that, because sometimes we look at people on social media and we look at, the reels that people put up and the pictures, and we think that we know them because they're putting up like the greatest snapshots of their life, when a lot of times, in truth, what's really happening is they're just showing us the best parts of their life, right? When behind the scene they're really going through it and they're not really showing their healing journey. So that was the purpose of the exercise, really, just to show, like, there are things that people may not know about you and things that you're not showing in your exterior that potentially people cannot see as well. So what is trauma? Trauma really refers to an emotional response to an overwhelming event or series of events that are deeply distressing or disturbing to an individual. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what that means. It's really can be caused by a lot of different things. And so when we think about trauma now in this world, we think about like very big traumatic things, like going and having a car accident, right? That's traumatic. Or abuse, that's dramatic. But trauma doesn't necessarily have to be these big things. They can also be little things, right? Like when you were younger, expressing something to your parents and not feeling validated, not feeling seen, not feeling heard, right? That can actually cause trauma, right? Because it causes you to have an emotional response. And in time, what happens is those emotional responses can trigger your nervous system and cause overwhelming events, and then cause to have a series of events to happen, and which then in turn into a deeply distressing or make you really uncomfortable within yourself. And so that is what trauma is. A lot of people think that trauma is this big thing, and really doesn't really need to be. And so there's a wide range of like experiences, including physical, emotional, neglect, violence. Like I said, there's so many different things. Natural disaster, right? So people who experience tornadoes or hurricanes, that is considered them experiencing trauma, right? If you live in the islands and you're constantly having to board up your house or having to evacuate, that is considered trauma. So these are all examples of different forms of trauma that you can have throughout life, right? So it can affect many different people. So not one person is actually exempt from experiencing trauma, right? Everybody experienced it very differently, and it can lead to different symptoms and different ranges of symptoms too. Not everybody has the same symptoms when they do experience trauma, right? So some people might have like intrusive thoughts, negative thoughts. Maybe they have memories, bad memories, and some people might have nightmares. Some people may experience flashbacks or emotional dysregulation, which means that they get emotional and they might start crying or might have an anger problem, depression, maybe even having trouble sleeping. So there's so many symptoms that can come from trauma that you might not even realize you're experiencing now or that you've ever experienced. And so it's important to note that trauma is really subjective and it can be different for everybody. So what may be traumatic to you as an individual may not be traumatic to somebody else. And so it's important that if you do feel trauma or you feel certain things that are a little overwhelming and are giving you distress, that you do see a therapist and you talk to somebody who is qualified. What is healing? And so healing really refers to a process of restoration, recovery, or transformation. And it's often in relation to something physical, emotional, or your spiritual well-being. And so I love talking about healing because a lot of people don't realize that even little things can be very healing and very, very nurturing. And so healing involves addressing and resolving really the underlying issues that you're going through when you have trauma. And that means addressing the imbalances that you have in your life that may be contributing to a discomfort that you may be feeling or distress. And that can be emotionally, like it says here, it could be an emotional distress where you're just feeling a lot of emotions, or it could be a physical thing, like it could be an upset stomach, it could be feeling shaky, it could be headaches, it could be being nauseous. These are all symptoms of really experiencing trauma in the body. And you can experience it spiritually as well. And so physically healing really involves repairing and restoring your body tissues, right? So like if you think about if you broke a bone, right? That's physically healing, right? You need that bone to mend, you need that process to heal. Like there's a protocol for that. Emotionally healing, right? If you think about, I do this a lot when I think about like kids, when a little kid ends up calling another kid ugly, right? That is emotional distress. And so the way you heal that, right, it's either a parent or somebody older will go into the process of talking to this child and explaining to them that that's not really what they mean. And there's a whole process of kind of de-escalating that and making the child feel comfortable in themselves again. So again, healing is a process and it can be different as well. Like trauma, it can be different for everybody and it could look different. But really healing generational trauma, the first and most important thing is you have to develop self-love. Self-love is a state of appreciation for oneself that grows from actions that support our physical, psychological, and spiritual growth. And it means taking care of your own needs and not sacrificing your well-being to please others. And so I want you to think, especially in generational trauma, I want you to think about the many times that as a Latino or even a first gen, where you have sacrificed your own wants, needs, desires for your parents, or maybe even if you are the oldest sibling for your younger sibling, right? And so a lot of those times you have put your self-love at the end in order to give to other people in your family. And that causes trauma. Constantly giving of yourself when you haven't dealt with yourself internally really does cause a lot of trauma. And so the first thing you have to do is be aware that the fact that you gave so much of yourself to your family does cause trauma, and it's okay to feel the emotions that you do feel, right? Whether that be resentment, whether that be hatred, whether that be guilt, whether that be shame, all those feelings are totally normal. And you need to start looking in the way of like, okay, these were my actions. This is what I thought I should have done and what I knew best. Now I know better, and now I need to move forward. And so self-love is really taking those small moments in your life where now you're making better decisions because you know better, and so you're doing better. So let's go on. So the overall really self-love is accepting yourself for who you are, regardless of what you did when you were younger, regardless of the choices you make, right? And so why is self-love so powerful? It's really because it means that you're accepting your emotions for what they are, and you're putting your physical, emotional, and mental well-being first. Now, I want you to think about when you were a child. I know for me, growing up, if I got emotional crying, it wasn't okay. My mom would be like, well, if she said something and it upset me, and she'd be like, well, do you want me to hit you so that you can cry for real and have a reason for crying, right? And so that's trauma. Having somebody tell you that what you're feeling is not validated, that you shouldn't be feeling these emotions on a constant basis, is trauma, right? And you start doubting yourself, you start thinking that what you're doing is wrong, and it starts like getting into your subconscious mind and your unconscious mind, where you actually don't start loving yourself, and you love yourself less and less. And so the reason why self-love is so important is because it motivates you to start making healthy choices in your life, right? I want you to think back to a time where you felt invalidated in your life, whether that be from your parents, whether it be something that happened in school, whether it was with a friend or whatever relationship. I want you to think about a time that happened. And a lot of times, especially us Latinas and us Latinos, and like in our families, what we tend to do is people please. We make choices to people please others because we don't want to either cause confrontation, or we don't want to rock the boat. We just kind of don't want things to get out of hand, because we've experienced so many times people either gaslighting us, or people belittling us, or people questioning our actions or choices, right? And so when you hold self-love for yourself, you hold yourself in a high esteem, and you're more likely to choose things that really nurture your well-being and serve you well, versus you actually doing stuff for other people and being stuck pleasing, right? Your parents, pleasing your siblings, pleasing an adult authority or somebody else, right? And so in the chat, I want you to go ahead and tell me, what is one thing that you want to improve or work on about yourself that you've never really had the opportunity to think about doing because you've been so overwhelmed with other things, and that's something that from now until the rest of the year that you would like to work on. I'll give everybody a few minutes. Well, a minute. So I got a few things in the chat. So I have treat myself more often with things that I like. I love that. That's definitely something to work on and improve for the rest of the year. For me, it's really listening to my body, right? I tend to overwork myself, or over make my schedule very busy, and I tend to push myself in order to actually make everybody else happy besides myself. And so really putting myself first, just like you said, Catherine, like really treating yourself and putting things, doing things that you like.
I also quería decirlo, bueno, ya lo voy a decir en español. Quería decir lo que lo pueden decir en español si no saben decirlo en inglés. También ella entiende español.
Thank Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, so the next thing really the self-love piece is so important, because you want to grow into self-mastery. And the way to do that and overcoming generational trauma is understanding your thoughts, understanding the vision that you have, and really who and what you are in the life that you're living right now, right? So many of us are walking around not sure of who we are, of what we want, because we've been living in the shadow of somebody else, whether that be our parents, again, whether that be our siblings or cousins or aunts or tias, right? And so in order for you to heal that trauma, to heal that, you really need to start thinking about your own thoughts. Like, what voice do you hear in your head when you are making choices and decisions? Is it your mom's voice telling you, like, no, you can't do this because so and so? Or is it really your voice telling you, these are your options, this is what you can and can't do, this is what we want to do, this is what we like to do? So you have to be very mindful of the thoughts and visions that you are thinking about and portraying, because it could be somebody else's voice because of the trauma that you've had over the years, right? And so it's really essential to the first, like I said, self-love is the first thing that you want to like your goal to achieve is self-love. And so right here I have a wheel. And so this wheel is a self-mastery wheel. And nobody in this entire life, entire world ever reaches self-mastery, because we are all growing human beings and we're always learning, and we can never stop learning. There's always going to be something new, right? But the key is, in order to continue growing, you have to go through the wheel continuously, right? And so the first thing is really having awareness about what you need, right? At the moment, at the time, and the time of day, and the hour, and the minute. What is it that you need? What is it that you're thinking? So awareness into that aspect. You need to trust yourself. When you make a decision, a lot of us probably go back to our parents. We're like, do you think this is right? Do you think I should do this? Right? Because we're so accustomed, especially as a Dominican. I know that when I went to college, or before I went to college, I went to college because my parents wanted me to go to college. I didn't even know what I wanted to do in college when I first went. Like, I wanted to go for this or I wanted to go for that. But these were all things that I was coming up with because I was so pressured by my parents growing up, knowing, like, you got to go to college, you got to go to college, you got to. And so I wasn't aware of what I really wanted. And so I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation that I'm going back to school because I'm now, as a 30-year-old woman, aware of what I want to do for myself, and really what decisions I want to make. And so that's the first piece, is becoming aware of it. And the second is trusting yourself and believing in yourself that you can do it. And so whatever decision or whatever you put in the chat or whatever you were thinking in your head about what is it that you want to accomplish for the rest of the year, something you want to work in, you have to trust yourself that any decision that you do make is right for you, regardless of what that looks like for your family. If that means you have to move across the country or go to somewhere else, or leave your family behind, you have to trust that it's right for you, even if it's not right for your family. You have to be able to open yourself to discovery. And that's the third step, is really to self-discover yourself. There's a lot of things that we hold on to. And when you have trauma, you kind of get stuck in this box and you're reliving the same moments over and over again. For example, if you look at a lot of men in the Hispanic community, there's a lot of machismo. And that comes because of trauma that's been passed down over and over again. And that's because a lot of these men grow up seeing, somebody and trusting the person that comes before them. And they have no awareness of themselves. They don't trust their decisions. And they never took time to discover how they really wanted to be. They just followed who they know and what they know before them. And so that's why it's so important. In order for you to self-master your own decisions and let go of that trauma, you really have to be aware of yourself, trust yourself, and discover the things that you want to do, right? And then the last one, right before self-love, is you have to care about yourself. And I tell people a lot of times, self-care and self-soothing are two different things. Self-care may look like you going and getting a pedicure, getting a massage, going on vacation. And all of these things are wonderful. They're great for you. They release a lot of stress and anxiety. but it's not the same as self-soothing. And as first gen and Latinos, we have a lot of self-soothing to do. A lot of us have emotions that we don't connect to and we just ignore. And then a lot of times what happens is we explode, right? Whether that be us getting angry at something, or that us crying over something, or us like yelling at somebody, or either just like not going into a depressive state. There's so many different ways that it plays out, especially if you have kids. Like if you have kids, then you take it out on your kids, right? And so I grew up, not to bash my father or anything, but I grew up being beat, right? Like that's what my dad knew. That's all he knew. And so he passed that down to me. And so a way to self-soothe is really thinking about what you're feeling and sitting down with it and really releasing the guilt and the shame that you have. And it could be different ways. You can journal, you can meditate, you can listen to calming music and just kind of feel your body and like where the sensations are, right? You can take a warm bath and kind of just give yourself that moment to just relax and clear your brain. So there's different ways that you can care for yourself. And as Latinos, we don't do that enough. We're stuck in this hustle, hustle, hustle. I have to work. I have to do this accomplishment. I have to get this career. I have to get this certificate or degree. Like once we finish one goal, we want to go on and move on to the next, because we're constantly striving for external validation from somebody else because we're dealing with our trauma and we're not actually listening to ourselves. You don't need external validation, and you won't need to hustle and constantly want more from other people if you are okay with yourself. And so it really begins with your confidence and really prioritizing yourself without feeling the guilt, without feeling the shame or the fear. Because at the end, you're the only one that can feel your love. You're the only one that can trust yourself. You're the only one that cares enough about yourself, right? The only person that's in these little walls right here is you. Nobody else can see that. Nobody else can hear it. Nobody else is in there to help you out. And so you have to be able to save yourself at the end of it. All right. So I talked a little bit about awareness, right? And so I want to go a little bit more in detail. And so there are many reasons why people might struggle with self-love. And that's really because you're experiencing negative experiences or messages from others. You've internalized negative self-talk or beliefs. And so a lot of times, I know for myself, growing up, I didn't really have a very positive self-talk, right? Especially in Latino households, especially for the young girls, excuse me, we are criticized on our weight from a very young age, right? If we're too skinny, it's a problem. If we're too big, it's a problem. If we eat too much, it's a problem. If we eat too little, it's a problem. And so you grow up not knowing what direction to go. And so the negative self-talk and belief just starts automatically when you're young. And so you start comparing yourself to others, right? You compare yourself to other girls, right? You compare, especially if you're coming from the islands and you're coming here to America, now you're comparing your language, your accent, the way you act, how you're different from everybody around you, right? And so if you don't have awareness in yourself and the confidence you have in yourself in order to live really in genuinely being you, the self-talk is just unavoidable. And so it becomes difficult for you to accept really your imperfections or any mistakes. And you develop absorbing external stressors such as like work or relationship challenges that ends up adding to your trauma that you already have. All right. So because I focus on talking to women of color, I want to talk to Latinas at this moment. Really, you are probably struggling with self-love to a range of these factors, right? Overwhelming responsibilities. As Latina, especially if we're first gen or we're the first daughters, the responsibility put on us is to take care of the family, make sure that we're taking care of our mother, if we have a mother, and also taking care of the siblings, right? Mothering our siblings, mothering them and getting out of that. We are not even given a chance to have a childhood for most of it, for most people. And so you're overwhelmed with responsibility. You have societal pressures, right? You're expected to have a family of your own, then have a job as well, but make sure that you cater to your man while you're at it, or your partner, and not step out of your role, right? Because a lot of times they say, calladita te ves más bonita, and you're just expected to just be this thing. You're not seen as a human, as a being, right? And the third one is you also experience discrimination and racism. As women, we are a minority. We're seen as the little, right? We're overlooked in a lot of statistics and a lot of experiments and a lot of anything that's really put out into the world. But on top of us being Latina, we're even more overlooked in a lot of things. And so we're dealing with the constant, like, needing help from the government, or needing help with whatever it is, scholarship grants and things like that. And really asking for help. And that's a hard thing for us, especially if we have trauma, asking for help, because that makes us vulnerable, right? And we don't want to be vulnerable, because that brings up emotions we don't want to feel. And it becomes this ongoing cycle. And because we don't heal, it just kind of overlaps and becomes this giant onion. If you know what an onion is, have a bunch of layers that we have to peel away. And then the fourth and fifth thing is having intersectional identities. And so I know for me growing up, I went through a lot of identities. I was the only child for my mom, but I was the middle child for my dad. Very weird dynamic, because my dad had multiple kids from different women. And so I was in that middle of being like the oldest and the first daughter. And then, but I was also the middle child, and also at one point was the baby. And so it was just a lot, not understanding what my role was, and understanding like, wait, but you're giving me roles of like the first daughter, like oldest, but I'm also kind of be treating like a baby, not being listened to. And I wasn't sure where I went. And so that's where you kind of pick up different identities, and you're not sure who you are, or where you're going, or who you should be. And that shows up in our lives when we're picking careers, or we're picking our relationship with whatever partner we pick, right? And the last one is lack of representation. We as Latinas and Latinos don't really see our faces, or people who look like us out in this world. I know for a fact, for me, I'm a teacher, and I've been in many different districts and many different areas. And even going to school, I went to a predominantly white school. And even high school, like predominantly white high school. So for a long time, I was like, I'm the only one. And so when that happens, we don't want to voice anything, because we feel outnumbered. We feel like our voice doesn't matter. And so a lot of times we're dealing with that. And so most of the time we're making the mistake of really waiting to feel worthy of self-love and celebration before we even give ourselves permission to own it. And I'm here to tell you, like, in order for you to break those generational traumas, it's not going to happen in one day. It's not going to happen like, oh, I solved that one wound, let me be free now. Like, that's not going to happen. Like I said, we're onions. And so it takes little wins here and there to peel these layers off. But the more that you peel, the more that you heal. Oh, that rhymes. And you actually live better. You feel freer. You love more. You become the person that you've always wanted to be. So here's the big mistake, is that you spend too much time seeing everything and everybody else and absorbing what they want and what they need and what they expect. And you spend your life really living through that lens and that voice. And this is why you're the last person on your on your list. You will cover everybody else before you cover yourself. I know for me, for a long time, I would never buy myself a birthday present. I would just never, I would just, or I wouldn't want to celebrate my birthday because I didn't want the attention to be on me. But your birthday is special. You are special, even if you don't think it. Like, I now have a child, as you know, and I've learned how hard it is to actually be here as a human being. Like, it's like a miracle that we're all here. Like, it took the universe to like create you. Like you're literally here by a miracle, by the universe, by chance, for a purpose. And so celebrate yourself because you're different. There's no one else in this world that's you. No one. And if you weren't here, I guarantee you that there are more than two handsful of people that their lives would be inconvenienced because you do probably a lot, whether that's a mental load, whether that's physically, whether I'm sure like for a long time, I was a translator for my parents. I was the one opening up their bills and making sure that they were paid. I was the one making sure that their doctor's appointments were made or that their medications were. So I'm sure that you also have a lot of responsibility on your end. So celebrate yourself for being here, even if no one else does. And so a lot of times we make that mistake and put ourselves down. And so you have made really holding back a habit. You don't put yourself first. You don't speak up. You don't celebrate your wins. Your life and your happiness begins and ends inside of your mind. And sometimes we need to share what's in our heads in order for people to realize like you have a voice. You are somebody. And a lot of times with our trauma, the only way to heal is to speak, to say something, to show up. And we've been taught to and conditioned to not say anything, to kind of stay in the shadows. I know for me growing up, I was consistently told to respect my elders, right? Because I was a rebellious type, and I put that in quotations, where I would speak my mind, or I would say, no, that isn't right, or no, I would like it to do it this way. And so I was seen as, the rebellious one because in my family, people just followed their elders and they did what their elders did. And I would not be here giving you this presentation if I didn't listen to my own voice. And I was making this mistake of putting myself last and not listening to myself. And so you have to take a moment to think about the thought in your head and what voice you hear. Like I mentioned in the beginning, if it's your mom's voice or father or whoever's voice that you hear that's really critiquing you or shutting you down, you have to bring awareness to it and trust yourself that that voice isn't you, that voice came from the generational trauma that we came up with. And it's time for you to find your voice and what that sounds like and what that looks like and what that feels like. Okay, so really quickly, I don't want to take too much time on this, but I want you to, you're going to do this on your own, whether paper, pen, on your notes, whatever you decide to do. I want you to pull out and maybe put on your notes app. I know everybody has their phone by you, but I want you to list 5 things that you do not like about yourself. Just 5. I'll give everybody a minute. You don't have to share it with me. I want you to do this on your own. And this is more to show you awareness, right? About a lot of the mistakes that we do because of our trauma. You can just put in the chat, you can just write done when you finish, or you can give me a check mark or a thumbs up to let me know that you finished your 5. Let me see if I can see the chat. I'm just gonna make this a little. Remember, you're writing 5 things that you don't really like about yourself. Okay, now I want you to write 5 things that you love about yourself. I'll give you a minute. Kat, what was the last thing you heard? I've accidentally muted myself.
That now we're going to write 5 things that we love about ourselves.
Okay, wonderful. I'm gonna give everybody a few more seconds. Okay. I want you to take a moment, just internally yourself. I want you to think, which list was easier for you? Was it the list of hate about yourself or not like about yourself? Or was it the one you love about yourself? You can share in the chat which one took you longer. Um, and I want you to take a moment once you realize that, and realize that the relationship you have with yourself can really set you free, and where it can keep you trapped. If you're consistently looking at the list of you being able to fill the things that you don't like and hate about yourself faster, you're stuck in that mindset of constantly belittling yourself, not validating yourself, really just hurting your self-trust and your self-care, and you're just not loving yourself overall. If you made your list about the 5 of the things that you love about yourself and that was faster for you, that's great. You're on your journey to healing and you're doing a better job of it. That's wonderful. But if it was the reverse, you have to remember that you need to put yourself first. And the way you do that is by changing the thoughts that you have in your brain about what you think about yourself. And that's the first step, like that self-love is what's going to heal you from your trauma. It's not going to be your parents talking to you and forgiving you, or you asking for forgiveness and then apologizing. It's not going to be that. It's not going to be the world giving you something because you deserve it. It's not going to be a partner compensating for what you think you lost, right? At the end of the day, it's going to be you and the thoughts that you think. So really over time, you have to be mindful of the stories that you tell yourself on a constant basis, on an everyday basis, and what you believe about yourself, right? Do you believe, like for me, I know for a long time in my list was that I was ugly. That was the thing on my list, because growing up, my mom would constantly criticize me about, oh, I'm skinny here, I'm fat here, oh, I have chichos popping out, or my arms are too big, or that dress doesn't fit me. And so for a long time, I really hated my body, and I had to realize, like, no, those are not my thoughts. Those are my mom's thoughts. What do I actually feel about myself? And I had to take a moment to actually look at myself and realize, like, no, I actually love me and how I look, and I love how I fit into my clothes. I don't have to wear clothes that doesn't fit me. I can get clothes that fit me and that love my body versus the other way around. And a lot of times we have those moments where we're listening to somebody else's voice. So the battle isn't with your body, your bank account, your parents, the job. The battle is with your self-hatred. The trauma that we've experienced have made you hate yourself in certain ways you don't even notice, in ways that it's making you think certain things, it's making you feel certain things about yourself. And the healing starts with self-love. So often, really, self-love is shown to be about really like fixing yourself, but it's really about falling in love with the parts of yourself you've been ignoring or neglecting or trying to fix, right? There's probably something about you that you're just like, oh, if only I could be better. Or, oh, if only I can change that. Or, oh, maybe I can get that operated. Or maybe I can fix this. Or maybe I can do that. Instead of fixing it, why don't you just try to, one, be aware of it, then trust yourself that you know how to deal with it, whether it's how you look or how you feel, right? And then maybe discover a new way of handling of that thought, or maybe even coming up with new ideas or new thoughts or new inspirations of the people who you look up to and inspire to. That can help you start falling in love with yourself if you see people doing the same that look like you. Sorry, this is in the way. So one step is to practice self-compassion. This is going to lead to you really starting your healing process. So you need to treat yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would show a close friend. When faced with difficult emotions or situations, try to respond with self-compassion to yourself instead of self-criticism. How many times have you made a mistake and you're like, oh, you're so stupid? Or how can you do that? Or why, like, you berate yourself instead of taking a moment and being like, okay, we made a mistake. How can we fix it? And how can we learn from it? And let's move on. Or how many times have you done something and then you can't stop thinking about that you did that? You're like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that to her. Oh my God, I can't believe I gave that to him. Oh my God, I can't. And you just think about it constantly over and over again. Let me tell you right now, that person didn't even notice. That person is not thinking about what you said. That person is not thinking about what you gave them. That person didn't even notice. They don't even care. You know why? Because again, what's in these four walls is just you. They're thinking about themselves. You're the only one thinking about you, nobody else. So really, it involves offering words of kindness to yourself and reminding yourself that it's okay to make mistakes or have flaws. We're all humans. And a lot of times we were brought up to be grown-ups and we were taught to think that grown-ups don't make mistakes. But her parents, if you look at your parents made a lot of mistakes. And as a parent, I'm telling you right now, I am not perfect. And I will never be perfect. And I will never try to convince my daughter that I'm perfect and I have all the answers. We are learning together. Whatever she is giving to me, I am learning, and whatever I'm learning, she's learning as well. And so you have to think about yourself that way. You have a little inner child you, like an inner child cat that really needs your attention. A little Samantha, a little Valeria, like a little Eduardo that really needs you to take a moment and like be like, it's okay. We messed up on this, or maybe we didn't do this, or maybe we forgot about this. It's time to really focus on what you need in the moment to feel better. And so here are a few phrases that you can use, right? To build up your confidence. You can say, I believe in you. To celebrate yourself. You are amazing. To validate what you're saying and what you're feeling. I see you. I see you. I hear you. For optimism, because a lot of times in the Latino community, there's just a lot of pessimistic. I mean, if you just turn on the news, right? All the Spanish channel news, especially the Spanish channel news, there's never good news. It's all bad news. So why watch it? I don't want bad news in my life, right? And so motivate yourself. You can do this. If it's something hard, you can do this. And then take action. When you're taking action and you feel like you can't do it, remind yourself, you got this, keep going. These are a few phrases that I live by. I sometimes in the beginning, I would like when it was hard for my mental space and I was living in a negative, really emotional space, I would have them posted on my mirror where I would constantly see it every time I looked in the mirror, every time that I went to brush my teeth, every time I went to use the bathroom. Sometimes I would even have them in my car, posted in my car because I would spend a lot of time in my car when I was going to college. So like in my notebooks, anything that I was using, my phone now is a big thing. I have a big thing of affirmations and I read them on a daily basis, because if you're giving yourself negative thoughts on a daily basis, that's going to just continue. And I'm going to go a little bit more into detail a little bit soon, but you have to give yourself these thoughts on a daily basis. And if you just need a few prompts, you feel free to take these. The next is you can't buy self-esteem or self-love. You have to build it. So a lot of times, a lot of us are like, oh, if I have that dress, I'm gonna feel amazing. If I have that bag, or if I have that car, or if I have that big house, I'm gonna love it. I'm gonna be the best person ever. And that's not the way it works. You can't buy yourself into it. You have to build it. So you need to engage in your self-care. So make time for activities and practices that help you feel more connected to yourself and your friends, right? So that might include, if you love to exercise, find an exercise that you love. It doesn't have to be running if you don't love running. It could be yoga. It could be something else. You can meditate. If you don't like meditating, you can journal, right? Do something that you like. Don't do it because somebody else is doing it, right? Spending time in nature, or maybe even like engaging in hobbies or interests that bring you joy. That is the key. Going into things that bring you joy, doing things that bring you joy, and really prioritizing your own needs and making time for self-care on a regular basis. So how many times a day excuse me, do you give yourself the opportunity to do something you that brings you joy? I'm sure for most of us, it's not a lot because, like I said in the beginning, we're constantly hustling, we're constantly looking for the next goal, we're constantly moving, working, doing this, doing that. So take moving forward from today on and do one thing that brings you joy, even if it's for 5 minutes. For me, it's eating ice cream, okay? Don't judge me. And then last is challenge negative self-talk, right? So like I said, you are the only one in these walls. Nobody else can read your mind. Nobody else can see what you're thinking. Nobody else can control what's happening up here. You're the only one that have those controls. And so paying attention to the ways in which you talk to yourself and challenge any negative thoughts or beliefs that are serving you. So ask yourself, is there evidence to support the negative thoughts that you actually are thinking? Or if there's an alternative, more positive way of interpreting situations. So for example, like I mentioned about my mom's criticism of my body, right? When I started challenging that negative self-talk, I'm like, well, what do you really like about your body? Like, what don't you not like? What is it? Like, what are the little things really that you don't feel okay with? And honestly, it wasn't that many. There were like little ones, little things. And that was, I realized, well, that's just how my body grew. That's just how puberty hit. It was something that I could not control. And a lot of times we try to belittle ourselves and berate ourselves because of something we can't control. You can only control so much. And one of the things you can do is your thoughts. So over time, really practicing those positive self-talk can help you build a more positive and loving relationship with yourself. So be careful to not let negative stories get stuck on replay in your head, because if you have those things on a loop, that's how you're going to live your life, constantly with that negative self-talk in your head. So I want to talk about the reticular activating system, which is called the RAS. And so the RAS is really responsible for our wakefulness, our ability to focus, our fight or flight response, and how we ultimately perceive the world. It's a part of your brain, right? And it's usually at the back of your brain, and it brings all the information to the front of your brain, and so that you can actually do something about it, right? And it can control what you perceive in your conscious mind. Essentially, it's really like a gatekeeper for information. That's the way I see it. And so on the slide, I put a few things up where I put, I'm a failure. I'm not good enough. Nothing works out for me. So these are the thoughts that you're circulating in your reticular activating system. What happens is that because you're feeding these thoughts constantly and looping them in our brain, I'm just gonna let you know, our brain goes through 90,000 thoughts a day, right? And so these are on repeat and they never change on a daily basis. Guess what you're going to see? You're going to notice that you're a failure. You're going to notice when you're not good enough. You're going to notice when things are not working out. And so I'm trying to pull up. Let me see if this is going to work here. Okay, there you go. Here's an example of how it works, right? So if you believe that you are not good enough, you're going to start focusing on, you only focus on the things that you don't know how to do, or the people around you that seem to be doing better. If that's your thought, you're not good enough. These are the things you're going to be focusing on. And because you're focusing on that, it's going to reinforce in your brain, you're going to internalize the feeling of not being good enough. And that feeling is not good, right? You're going to feel like icky. You're not going to have really like, it brings self-doubt, not like you won't have any self-worth. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because you start acting in that manner. You start acting not good enough. You become more confused. You become slower to process things. You become uncertain when you're making decisions or anxious when you're making decisions, right? Even when that may not be who you really are. It's all coming down to a thought. I want you to think about when you see a yellow car or a punch buggy, right? Does anybody know what a punch buggy is, or a yellow car, right? You don't notice before, you didn't notice a yellow car or a punch buggy before. And then once you notice it, you can't stop seeing it, right? I think about, for example, my car. I just bought a Highlander recently, right? Before this, I had never seen a Highlander in my life. Never. On the road, nope, never saw it. Now that I have a Highlander, I see them everywhere. And that's because my RAS is like, oh, a Highlander is important to us because now we own one. So now my brain is focusing on all the Highlanders everywhere I go. And that's exactly the same thing your brain does. Every thought that you're constantly thinking and you're putting at the forefront of your brain, your RAS is like, oh, that thought is important, which means we need to believe it, we need to focus on it, and then we need to act like it. And so that's how I want you to see your RAS. And the way to change that is by the 3 things I just spoke about. And it's really about just changing your thoughts on a daily basis and doing it little by little. So I want you to forgive yourself for all the things you did while you were just trying to survive, because that is what most of us as first gen Latinos are trying to do, or we're trying to do in this world, is survive. Survive the world that our parents made for us, survive in a world where people didn't understand who we were, where we're coming from, surviving in a Trump era where people thought that we were just drug dealers and killers and rapists. Like, forgive yourself for all the things that you did thinking and trying to survive, and move on. Create a new life. Your generational trauma is not going to go away. Like I said in the beginning, it's not going to go away from one day to the next. It's going to take some time. And the only step you need to take right now, today, in order to start that, is to forgive yourself. Because you didn't know better to do better. But now you do. Now you know why you made the actions that you did. Now you know what's holding you back. And really, that's self-love and the thought that you're thinking. So I want you to go ahead and share, what are some takeaways that you got from this workshop that you will be taking with you today? And it could be anything, it could be 1 thing, 2 things, whatever you think. I really would appreciate it. And in the meantime, while you're doing that, I will take any questions if you have any. And lastly, I really just want to follow up with, you can follow me if you loved my conversation, my talk, at Valery Lucille on Instagram. And you can also sign up to receive my weekly self-love diaries email that I do on a weekly basis. The link is on my bio in my Instagram. I can also drop it on the chat if you want. I send out a weekly email every week talking about something new that you can possibly add to your self-love journey.
Thank you so much. That was so beautiful. I'm in awe, like, when you're like trying to take it all in. That was a lot of information, but so powerful. So thank you so much for sharing your time, this space. I know you have a younging now, so your mom, I know you're busy, and I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to be here with us. I also want to open it up for whoever wants to ask a question or say how they felt, or any statements that you guys have for Valery.
Hello.
Hi.
Well, I just wanted to say that this was a very powerful workshop actually, because I literally, when you were saying when we constantly repeat ourselves, or just push ourselves to the limit, and just not validate the things that we've done, that we've done to achieve those things, or to get to the point that we are, and we constantly just say that, no, you have to put yourself more, no, you have to get here, you got to get there. But that's a very bad motivation. You should say no, you can do it. Even though we say that, sometimes it's very false. We say, yeah, we've done it through here, but sometimes we don't believe it, and we actually constantly have in our minds the reticular, yeah, that that it's repeating us constantly. And it it has happened to me. So I like cried, not cried, but like I teared up a little bit because like I realized, whoa, like sometimes you're just como deteriorándote. Entonces, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing and being vulnerable with us. It's a lot of us don't realize, right? We go through life just thinking that what we're experiencing is normal. We think
Yeah,
that that's the way life should be, and those are the cards that we were dealt, right? And we don't realize that you can actually heal from it, and you can come out of that, and you can actually create the world that you want. And it doesn't have to be you killing yourself all the time, right? Because I know that's one of the things. It's like work hard, go to school, get a good grade, and then become the best person ever and have a high paying job and support your family, and then have your own family. Um, it's a lot. So, yeah, thank you for sharing.
I want to share something from like what Samantha said. Thank you, Samantha, for sharing that. That's very powerful, and thank you for being vulnerable, as Valerie said. I just wanted to highlight this, that it never stops, right? It's like every day is day one, right? Yes, we're healing, like, your behavior might change, your thoughts might change, right? But we're always healing and in a process, in a progress towards something. We never get to like perfection where we're like, we got this, we're perfect every day. We wake up in, maximal performance, right? It's not like that.
Yeah, it's like the wheel that I showed you in the beginning, the self-mastery wheel, and how it's constantly going around. If you notice, it's not a line. It's not a start and then an end. It's not a line. So there's not a start point in any of it, and there's not an end. There's not a goal or a place that you're going to achieve mastery, right? It's a constant loop and never ends. You're constantly going through it, and you're constantly learning things about yourself. I'm 30 years old. I have a 5-month-old baby. I'm married. I'm constantly learning new things about myself all the time. Like today, actually, I learned I have ADHD. I was just recently diagnosed. Didn't know that about myself.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah. So it's crazy. Like you are learning every day. And as long as you have patience with yourself, as long as you give yourself time to trust what you're feeling and don't neglect it, right? And don't self-hate, because that's what we were taught to do. We were just taught to just ignore it and just pretend like what we're feeling doesn't matter. Um, be emotional. Give yourself that moment to cry if you need to. Give that moment to feel the feelings. And if it hurts your chest, give that moment to kind of take a moment to just like feel it and care for yourself. Because a lot of times we're told that, oh, you don't have time for that. You have other things to do.
Yeah. Someone else wants to share, could be in Spanish, English, however they feel comfortable sharing. Going once, going twice. All right. All right. Okay. Well, thank you again, Valerie. I want to be respectful of your time. We went a little over, but it was a great conversation. So thank you again for being here. You're always welcome to Jovenes in Power. And of course, Jem and me, thank you so much. God bless you and your family.
Thank you so much. This was a pleasure. And anytime, I
Thank
love doing
you.
this, as you know, I love talking about this stuff. So was mine. Thank you. And thank you all for coming and for participating. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.